Hi, it's Luna. Welcome to day 19 of 31 Days of Horror 2024 as done in 2025. Today's movie is one that I've seen a couple of times throughout my life, and it's changed every time that I've seen it for what it means to me. It's one that I wish I could go into deeply, as I know many people have, but Possession, 1981. Let's talk about it. I think the thing that's easiest to do when you know a movie has been really analyzed almost to death in a way that is probably beyond your own abilities to explain in as good a way is just to draw on your own experience. What does it mean to you? For me, I first watched this when I was maybe 16. I was getting into my later teens, I suppose. So I was a horrible little edgelord, meme lord creature, and to me, I just found it very funny. One thing about this movie is that the acting is extremely histrionic, it's extremely melodramatic and theatrical, and I think that there's a few things that I've picked up on from movies that are in that 70s, early 80s era that come across as really cartoonish and unnatural to me, and that tickles my pickle. It makes me laugh. It still makes me laugh, even at my most recent rewatch. There's a couple of scenes that just are so Looney Tunes to me that it's funny. But I still wanted to watch the movie the whole way through at that time, and it's just because the characters are so extremely compelling. Second time was when I got home from university, and that's when I think I finally had a developed enough brain to not just laugh at the overacting and the more slapstick elements almost. And finally, we reach it now for 31 Days of Horror. And funnily enough, I think from all I've gleaned from life and experiences, I got the most out of it this time. And it's still something that's really difficult to describe in a way. I think that a lot of things about this movie are just really visceral and grotesque and really kind of skin crawling in a way that I actually understand it when people say that they go to viewings and faint. It's always such a dramatic thing, right? Like, oh, what was it? Longlegs 2024 in the summer, that was the movie that they wanted to make the summer horror. And so it was people ran screaming out of the cinema type language being used to describe people's experience of watching this film. And I don't think I've ever understood it for any movie except for maybe The Exorcist, but that's mostly on oh, people from the 60s probably weren't used to such graphic imagery. And yeah, Possession 1981 is the only movie where I think I can understand it because if you can't take anything else from watching this, then you can take just the stress. I don't care if you find it to be too dramatic, that it's laughable, like I did at 16. You'll still end up feeling some kind of distress and tension from spending 2 hours watching people scream at each other. That's just going to be something that, providing you don't have something in your brain that makes you not feel feelings, I don't think you can come away with this from this movie without just feeling that stress that never quite breaks properly. I don't think that this movie has a proper catharsis to it almost, which is a choice. So let's get on with the plot so I can expand on what a choice it is to end the movie the way it ends. Officially, we start with a car journey. It's going through the streets of West Berlin, I believe, Berlin 1981. It doesn't look super distinct to me personally in my experience with these scenes, but it's bleak. It looks like the wrong neighborhood TM almost for my eyes because it's just gray and dilapidated. It feels abandoned, and even though there's no litter, it looks dirty. It has that look to it. And it's this guy, Mark, played by Sam Neill, who I suppose his most known role is Jurassic Park. I'm not sure. To me personally, I know him most as Merlin from this one specific show that I think was BBC. I don't know. Anyway, on the drive back to his home, there's a kind of ambient soundtrack that's got some tension to it. It's a weird little soundtrack. It's almost, again, I feel like I've got that horrible zillennial humor where I find it's disjointed little chirrups kind of like funny. It's got meme potential, I think, anyway. Um, and when he's arrived home, he is greeted by his wife, Anna, played by Isabelle Gianni, and she wants a divorce. I feel like there's so much in the opening scene, even for how the movie carries on. It's a great movie for just kind of retelling itself constantly in an engaging way, I feel. So he asks her, "What do you want?" She says, "I don't know." He puts his bags down. She's like, do you want me to stay?" And she's like, "I don't know." So he puts his bags up, like, "Do you want me to leave?" "I don't know." And to me, it's so silly because in a way, what can you do with "I don't know"? But for me, I feel like a lot. Like that's already so much of the overwhelming feeling that's going into this divorce. But he leaves and says, "Well, you take care of Bob," and leaves her in the apartment, in their apartment. And it's a grim place. Again, just there's such bleakness to the entire environment of Berlin here, I think. There are no plants in this movie. I think there's a patch of grass. That's it. And it shows. After a distressed night over drinking, he returns home to find that their son Bob has been neglected. I told you I've watched this movie 3 times now, and I always manage to forget that they have a son. With everything that goes on, I he's so easy to just forget about. And when Mark returns home to go see the situation, it turns out that Anna has gone, who knows where. And when she returns, he is rocking in a chair, just like he looks so manic and deranged. Sam Neill has this really great expression that he pulls whenever he's just. I feel that obviously there's the subway scene from this movie that everyone really focuses on, where like it's all about Isabelle Adjani and like the way that she expresses the kind of mental breakdown aspects of the movie, but it leaves Sam Neill kind of undersung in his role, I think, because his face just does so much with just this low crazy and all of the aspects to his character that equal that possessive and really obsessive nature in his actions. And when she arrives home, he then says that she can't be trusted with Bob. Through this as well, is there someone else? And she said no, but when he phones her friend, he finds out, yes, there is. He meets this Heinrich, who is so slimy. It's got to be one of the slimiest characters in film for me. He kind of doesn't even do an awful lot, but he just, all of the aspects to him and the way he talks and the stuff he talks about, obnoxious, deeply obnoxious character. And he goes and confronts this Heinrich because he says, "Anna's with me. She doesn't want to be with you. You must respect her decisions." And yeah, Heinrich beats him up. It's all again. The funny thing is, I can still appreciate why my 16-year-old self found these scenes comedic, because there's a big absence of music in this movie, which, to its credit, then makes a lot of incidences to do with the divorce that are more grounded, feel more grounded. It's, again, maximized by this very bleak environment and the way that there's a lack of color and any kind of diegetic music and greenery again. But he's swinging him around on his shoulders. It's quite nuts, but just done in this very straight played way. So I feel you could sum this movie up as some kind of love triangle situation but it's not really much of a love triangle, even though Heinrich like involves himself very heavily into Anna's decision to leave Mark. He never actually feels like someone that Anna cares about. It's To me, it really feels like Anna's movie. But so, really, the short summary is that it's a psychological movie that focuses on the breakdown of the marriage between Mark and Anna. Heinrich isn't as involved as you'd think he would be. I'd feel we know that how horror is a nebulous category, like so many things fit under the umbrella, but I do feel that apart from when the monster appears, you probably wouldn't put this in the horror category at all, even though it is so harrowing to watch because of these scenes that feel extremely real and soulful. I don't think there are many moving parts to this movie at all in terms of other characters. We have Mark and Anna, their son Bob, who I always forget exists, and so do they most of the time, to be honest, because of what's going on with them. Heinrich's mum, she gets quite involved, and Margie, who is Anna's friend, who Mark can call and get some information from, and a little revenge hookup. Then there's Helen, the teacher, Anna's doppelganger, and some detectives. But it's honestly very difficult to remember characters outside of Anna and Mark because the whole thing is just their explosion and everything else is just shrapnel in this movie. Everything is, as I've said, extremely dramatic and theatrical with them. It's something that if it relaxed the soul to carry it, would just make this movie laughable. And again, bringing up the fact I first experienced it when I was 16 and didn't have so much of this life experience, I think that's what made it laughable to me then. And I wouldn't want to put assumptions on anyone who's my age now and it doesn't hit for them and they still find it very just overacted and kitschy and like too ridiculous and amateurish. But I do wonder if there's a reason that they don't catch the soul. There's a part of me that wants to go through the scenes of this movie blow by blow, but I actually struggle to remember how they connect to each other. And that would also sound like a criticism, like a bad commentary. Like if they don't fit together in a thing that flows in my head, then how can that be equaling a good, engaging experience? But it's really difficult to describe how, to me, it's disjointed, yes, but the way that the scenes are, they still feel important around the context that they're in. So the best I've got for you is just to pick out scenes that I like remember the most every time for where they are. As I said at the beginning, it's a difficult film to talk about, not because of its themes for me. I haven't been through like a violent divorce or anything, but it's just very trippy. It's kind of it's got these trippy elements that aren't art house. It's not the kind of thing that you're just purely feeling it. A lot of it has a lot of imagery that you feel maybe, or I definitely feel like I'm not getting it, as if there's some bigger, deeper allegorical meaning. And I know that there will be some elements of that, of course. I just don't have that experience of Berlin 1981, which is very like important to this movie, I think. I don't know how important it was to the director to make sure that this all took place in Berlin, but it definitely maximalizes on those themes and impressions of the movie of secrecy and walls and a kind of home invasion. Like during the Berlin Wall period, how could you not see it as the best setting for something with duality and divorce and secrecy? It's a mad one as well for the way that this, again, was a third rewatch for me throughout different periods of my life. But I also forget along with the fact they have a son, that Mark's a secret agent. It seems to come out of nowhere in the last part of the movie, but it is seeded. It is there at the start. It just really explodes in the final bit in a way that feels really out of the blue when we've been so lost in this episode where it's all about them. It's all about the divorce. And even by the end, it is still all about them. But it is just so difficult to kind of reconcile with reality because I think maybe it's a movie thing, but the idea that secret agents are real is, I don't know. Sometimes it's weird. I think, as I said, because it's the movie thing, it's James Bond stuff and I don't know, real action movie things that then feel actually more departed from this story of a divorce that apart from when the monsters around is again really like it could happen. That could be a lot of people's reality with that situation. Returning to what I said as well about a movie that is this boiling and bubbling with scenes that could have allegorical meaning, that could have historical context, but I don't know it. Um, my anecdotal tidbit is that I have been to the areas of the Berlin Wall a couple of times, and the way that it's been kind of memorialized, like it's all not all, but a lot of it is preserved in a way that people can look on it and see kind of bits of how it was, and the impact of that history is still there. Like it is a big scar across the landscape still, and silly little things like how the green man to cross the road is different is there, but then bigger things as well that really do make it like a scar. um Maybe there's an element to the fact that I was there in February when it was flipping freezing. Also, just really translated the bleakness to me that I definitely appreciate it a lot more since that trip. A lot of the settings in this movie are also very tight. They're very like just you can't move in these spaces. The only time that they feel big is when we get more of a camera angle that seems to be giving their son Bob's impression, or when Mark is in his work offices. They're very spacious and sparse in a way that still is delivering that kind of breakdown of society feeling almost. I do really admire in the cinematography how either the space feels really sad and tight, like you can't move, like you can't breathe, and the grayness is like penetrating almost. Their apartment, Mark and Anna's, it's got some like blue curtains. And there is a lot of symbolism in the blue, I think. I can't fucking I didn't rehearse this. The curtains are not just blue. There's clearly something going on that's intentional with these areas where Anna wears a lot of this dark blue, where it is giving a bleakness, a loneliness, a depression. And the apartment definitely has that oppressive feeling of all of these negative emotions that you feel like you're drowning in. But when the spaces do feel a lot more large, they still feel like everything feels distant. It's like you're setting up a dollhouse or something. It's very weird and uncanny. And it's still a lot of this gray imagery, a lot of white, sterile. And yeah, I feel that that's then getting across that kind of estrangement as well. There's a lot of scenes of Mark on the phone early on where I feel that that's also getting across that message of being unable to communicate. And I like the way that there's a connection to that as well when I haven't really spoken about how, okay, so I would say that in their dynamic, because, you know, you've always got to pick a side during a divorce, even if you're not picking a side. There are elements of you that's trying to pick a side. Mark and Anna, you could say, are as bad as each other. You could say that. I'm obviously on Anna's side, though. But Mark shows these controlling elements early on when he's going into work and it's not super duper clear to us, I feel, that he's a secret agent man. Um, but he's definitely in an environment that is fostering his paranoia, his suspicions, that element of the secrecy. And when he is telling Anna to break up with Heinrich, tell him it's over, come home, like you will make it better again. You need to tell him it's over. She says, I need to tell him face to face. And he says, no, on the phone. And there's an element of that, of course, so he can see her that she's actually doing it. But I wonder as well if then there's another aspect to it where, because he spent a while only being able to communicate with her over the phone, if he feels that her telling him it's over on the phone will actually put them on a more equal footing. I think this was, I may be wrong now, the brain mush. But I think this is after he met him and they say various silly, you know, one-upmanship things like who's the better lover, and both of them are controlling in interesting ways, I think. For Mark, as I said, he is then very he is part of the oppression their living space is giving in all of these scenes. He's part of then this crushing sense. But for Heinrich, it feels interesting the way that his control, it's very snaky. It's very oily because he's clearly thinking, well, she will come to me if she is free. And so he's really then pushing on her this idea that she needs liberation, but that liberation is with the contingent that she needs to go to him once she is liberated. It's very interesting. And he has the way that he is oily to me, the way that he is big ick. He's got all of these kind of guru aspects going on. He's all spiritual. The first we see his name is on a letter that he sent to her from the Taj Mahal. And he says this line that I should remember because it's important because of the faith themes. It's something along the lines of in the Taj Mahal, I see half of God, I see the other half of God in your face. Something along those lines. And as I say, this pops up a few times, the idea of God specifically. And I don't have loads to say on it. I feel that to me, I never have a deep attachment to the themes of faith in movies or other media. But what I get the impression of from Possession 1981 is that it's a breakdown of faith as well, that religious faith throughout the movie, because when he asks Mark, when Heinrich asks Mark, like, what do you think of God? It doesn't sound as rubbish as my memory's saying. I can still see people probably being not a fan of the dialogue, but Mark says something along the lines of God is poison. And this, I enjoy it so much. I enjoy it because when he says God is poison, he also means Anna. When Heinrich says, oh, I see half of God in your face, and Mark feels the same. Like, that's God. Their love is God.
Our love is God. Our love is God.
Yeah, wrong movie, I know. Heather's on the brain all day, every day. But their love is poison. It's such a wild one. It's so interesting. I love hearing other people's interpretations on this movie because I feel that a lot of us just get so many different things. For me, I find the ending to be kind of vampiric in a way. It reminds me of the way that a lot of vampire media, it's that thing they can't create. They can only kind of resurrect something that's already dead, but like there's no future. There's only like one thing to obsess over, and that obsession is poison. And the thing with the monster, I've never really got the monster in that way that I said. Whenever you feel like you're not getting a film, it's frustrating, but there's so much more that I do get from this film personally that it's okay to me. But the monster, it's more like the creature, and the creature is simultaneously like her child that she birthed, but also her lover. It's one of the more icky moments in the movie when Mark has, at some point, without saying it outright, decided that ride or die, whatever Anna's up to with luring people to her new apartment and feeding them to the monster, a la Hellraiser, with Frank in the floor. He's on board with it, but he does walk in on them making love, her underneath this writhing meat juice thing with a tail. It's very weird, and I love the gore though. And when this thing eventually evolves, morphs, when this thing eventually becomes Mark in the final scene, he's got the same creepy green eyes that Helen, Anna's doppelganger, who's the school teacher. Sorry, I feel like I haven't explained these parts very well. As always, these are spoiler reviews, so I hope you've seen the movie before, because whoa, this is a difficult one to add context to without a script. I love it because of Sam Neill's flippin' expression. Again, he's so good in this movie at pulling these very like manic little smiles that are kind of like they give him baby face. It looks just so kind of wrong in like something close to an uncanny valley way. Maybe, I don't know, awkward attic. Yeah. And the way that I interpret that, because of me being all like, oh my God, I love vampires, is that way that then, as I say, their love is poison. And it means that even after all of this trying to divorce, it's still just them. They're still then obsessed with each other. It's just in a different way, you know? And when this creature does morph into Mark as they're dying, it does feel like that inability to move forward, and the way that she's so deeply and like mentally and physically affected by this relationship that she maybe had the chance to make something different, but couldn't. All this time she's been feeling so oppressed and controlled by him, but he's all there is in her vision for the future. There's nothing else that she can create. And it feels like it ties well into the beginning when he's like, well, shall I go? She's like, I don't know. Shall I stay? I don't know. Like, she never moved out of that. And it is just the beauty in this movie of that underlying tension that just never evaporates. It's always just an I don't know. It's always like a Mexican standoff, that showdown feeling that leads to mutually assured destruction. And maybe that's where we can say something about how the movie ends with just nuclear war, presumably. Doppelganger Mark goes to the apartment after real Mark and Anna have been shot to death and die in each other's arms. And Helen, the school teacher, is there because she's been hanging around to look after Bob, because she's then ideal Anna. She's like the Anna that Mark knew before, I guess. Like, it's not ever really like brought to light why she looks so much like her. I appreciate at least that Mark goes, "Wow, it's absolutely uncanny. You look exactly like my wife." At least he brings it up. That's all I need sometimes. Certain movies, I'm like, please, I'm so out of it because this character has acknowledged nothing about how weird the situation is. But she's like, "I'll have to Bob." And then when she goes to the door, their son Bob, he has some kind of flip switch, and he's like, "Don't open it, don't open it." He's got such a cute little British accent. I've done this before. I'm British. I don't know why it's like extra cute to me to hear small English children acting. But no, this kid is a gem. I think I went to look it up at one point. He doesn't seem to have acting credits in anything else, but he's great in this movie. I feel mean for forgetting he exists every time, but well, that's the obsession and the hold that the pair just have, that nothing else exists. But when Helen goes to the door and he's like, "Don't open it, don't open it, don't open it," and he runs up to the bath and just dives in and like drowns himself, or presumably he drowns himself. He's just like face down in there, like bobbing a bit. Is that why he's called Bob? Um, anyway. Before Helen can open the door to Doppelganger Mark, sirens, big explosion noises, nukes. It's such a fantastic movie. I mean fantastic, like the fantasy. It's just so deep and twisted. The deep and twisted dynamics can mean so much, so many different people. And I hate that. There's an element that I could so easily dislike this movie for that kind of abstraction. You know, sometimes there are certain bits of art where it's so kind of obtuse or so easy to interpret in a myriad of ways that it almost feels like it doesn't mean anything. Back to that point I made earlier where there's soul to this movie, there's soul to these characters and the dynamic that sell it to me. These moments where there's no music, there's no like non-diegetic soundtrack kind of guiding you into how you should feel about a moment, where it does just instead feel almost like a documentary or voyeuristic. That thing that I like about a lot of 70s movies. I feel that because it's kept that soul to it, it's not obnoxious for a, well, how did it make you feel? That's what the movie should be. Yeah, I so much to say. It's just difficult to order it in my mind. Because okay, one more important thing for me is then that mirroring, that doubling, the scene where Anna is then a ballet teacher. It feels like there's a few different ways to interpret that. That you could say, oh well, yeah, surely that sounds correct. She is being recorded by Heinrich, I think, and she has this student that is doing maybe it's a plie. She's doing a ballet move with the bar and the balancing, where she's kind of like trying to touch her toe to her head, and Anna is guiding her, but like forcefully instead, like obsessively, like meticulous detail. She's got her stomach, she's like, hold it, hold tighter, hold your stomach tighter. And I feel that one hit me this rewatch because I connected it for the first time to then the subway miscarriage scene. And I don't know, just to focus on the stomach like that, maybe I am reading too much into it. But I feel that it's like she is talking to herself, maybe because of then thinking about things like Black Swan and Perfect Blue. But I feel also that because of how she addresses the student afterwards, saying like, "Oh, very good," when she is just not putting in the same effort that the other student was, who was being just very hounded, very belittled and berated. I feel that then that is also something that you can interpret as how Anna treats Heinrich and Mark. The first one being Mark, like a weird expected perfection that is beyond perfection, that is just torture instead. And then the other one just like, "Oh yeah, you're great, you're fine, very good," being Heinrich, maybe. You can interpret it like that, I suppose. But I prefer thinking about Anna and her feelings. It's definitely a movie that belongs in those kind of oh man, I hate it because I don't really like the phrase for reasons that you could say it's not that deep, but I'm like, everything is that deep. But those kind of like I'm just a girl edits where actually it is like the female rage, the hysteria. So, because the scene is filmed in the way that it is, with it being a movie within a movie, I feel that that also ties together that whole duplicity, doppelganger reflection thing going on. The way that Anna Isabel Adjani is looking directly at the camera, at us, but also the person, you know, behind the camera at the time. I love those scenes when they're used well. And I think this is a grand one for then as well. The line that it's another one where some people could be all, "Oh, this is just so saccharine and kitschy and silly." But it's the line, "You say I for me." And she says that twice. I need to hear someone who has less soupy thoughts than I do talk about this. Because to me, for the parts that I enjoy about this movie most, this just mostly melds together again with that toxic love. You say I for me. It reminds me of relationships I've had where you realize you're not really the one in the not in the driver's seat, but like you're not really in the passenger seat anymore either. You're just in the trunk, and someone is making decisions for you, kind of making your image that you present to the world even. And it's too controlling. And there's an element of that as well where, because of the expressions that she pulls, the repetition, and the way that it's presented in the chronology of the scenes. Is she talking more to Heinrich? Is she talking more to Mark? Is she just talking to herself because of that mirror aspect of the camera as well? I'm doing it now. What am I looking at? I'm looking at the camera lens. I'm doing it to like look at you, to look at me. Ooh, sorry. I'm wrapping this up now. I love this movie. The only thing that holds it back a little bit for me is the runtime. I think it really, like, I like it for contributing to how the horrible banality of a bleak situation where you are still paranoid and terrified. Like, this is another fun thing that will be relatable across the ages, I fear. When nothing's happening, it's really boring, but you got anxiety. That's kind of what the runtime feels like to me. So to me, strictly speaking, this is 2 Annas and 2 Marks out of 5 stars for me. Let me know what you think. If you like this, then I have loads more where that came from on the channel for catching up with 31 Days of Horror, and there will be more to come with the whole playlist should you like to peruse. I hope you'll join me next time for day 20 of 31 Days of Horror 2024 as done in 2025 for a suspenseful murder thriller mystery with a slightly supernatural twist from Japan that will make you really paranoid every time someone asks, "How are you?" I'll see you next time. Take care.